Hello everyone, it is Jazz here, and today I am here with my September reading wrap-up. Very excited about this wrap-up because in the month of September I finished my Goodreads challenge to read 36 books in a year. So yay for me! I read 3 normal books and 4 graphic novels / comics. So I read 7 books in all. Lots of good reading got done. So let's talk about all the books. First book that I completed in September was The Mermaid Chair by Sue Monk Kidd. This book centers around a character named Jessie. Her daughter has gone to college, and after her daughter leaves, she realizes that she really, in her marriage, has no identity. She doesn't feel like she really knows herself or what's going on. And in the midst of that sort of realization, her mother, who has always been a little kind of cray-cray since Jessie's father died in a boating accident, decides that she is going to cut her own finger off. So Jessie has to go to her old hometown, which is on an island in South Carolina, and sort of help her mother. To add on to all that, Jessie finds herself very attracted to a man who is a monk named Brother Thomas, who works in a monastery on the island, and they start up a relationship. So yeah, Jessie's got a lot going on. I'm really gonna try to work on not sounding like I hated this book, because I didn't necessarily hate this book. Now, I went into this definitely knowing that I probably wasn't going to love it as much as The Secret Life of Bees, and I just, by the summary of this, didn't think I was going to be in love with this book, but I thought I would at least like it, so I definitely wanted to pick it up and give it a go. And there are some really good things about this book. There is a really beautiful writing style. It has some cool mythology things going on with the mermaid chair, because there actually is a chair with mermaids in it, and there's like a mythology around the mermaid chair, and also a mythology around the island and different things that are going on within the island. Even though it takes place in the 80s in the real world, there are some really cool mythologies that the author came up with. And I did like the mystery that was going on with Jessie's mother and why she was self-mutilating herself, and that's actually the element that really kept me reading this book, because there was some small issues, or possibly large issues, that I had with this book. There's times when you're reading and you just get into a book and you realize that the main character is just freaking annoying. And Jessie definitely is that character to me. I don't think the author intended this, but she definitely did come off as really self-involved. Like, she didn't seem to really acknowledge that any of her choices were going to affect anybody else other than herself. Now, I often try really hard to just divorce my feelings about the character's choices from my personal feelings, because you can't expect every character to be just like you or do what you would do. But for some reason in this case, I just couldn't do it. I felt like the author was trying to say that, yeah, Jessie has a lot of issues, and I understand that, and I didn't expect her to be a perfect character because of these issues. But I do think, personally, you don't have to disregard everybody in your life to find yourself. Maybe the best way to find yourself is just to be by yourself for a second. I think I would have just preferred that Jessie spent more time trying to help her mother than worrying about, you know, having an affair with some dude. Love scenes where I think the author was trying to be tasteful and artistic instead of, you know, gross. She actually kind of just ended up making them seem really cornball. And then that was another thing that just was like eyeball roll. So there were some good things about it. I did really like Jessie's relationship with her mother's friends. I did love the parts where the male characters actually had a point of view in the story, because most of it's written in first person from Jessie's point of view, but there are some chapters that are written in third person that really focus on the male characters in the story, and I did like those. They were kind of like a nice break from Jessie. But yeah, I spent a good deal of this book just being and just like that, and like rolling my eyes and then bothering my mom talking about how annoying Jessie was. I did give this 3 stars because even though I don't think this is necessarily my type of book, I do think other people would probably enjoy it, and also there are some good elements to it. So I didn't want to give it lower than 3 stars, even though it definitely, I probably won't reread it, but it's not horrible. Me and my mom share a Comixology account, and she bought an X-Files comic, and I've been meaning to read that thing for like a year or more. So I decided to pick up X-Files Classics Volume 1. This is basically just a collection of stories that are X-Files cases that Mulder and Scully go on. They're kind of set in early seasons of the TV show, so probably about season 1 or 2. It's kind of cool because it's still in that interesting area where Mulder and Scully are kind of getting to know each other. It's always fun to read about Mulder and Scully. I will say that probably the cases that they investigate in these stories are not as good as a really excellent episode of X-Files, which is kind of why I didn't give this 5 stars, even though I highly enjoyed it. So I did give this 4 stars, and I would suggest checking it out if you're an X-Files fan. I was on my Scribd app looking for a new comic to read, and I noticed that they had all the Marvel Noir comics. If you remember a month or so back, I can't remember, maybe 2 months ago, I read X-Men Noir, and I didn't really love that. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. But it still kind of made me open to reading more of the Marvel Noir series, and I definitely was open to reading Daredevil Noir because I feel like Daredevil is already sort of noir in itself, and so it really suited that genre for me. So basically the story is just about Matt Murdock. His backstory is a little different in this because he's blind. You know, he wasn't able to really be a lawyer because it's set in the past and an alternate past. He works for Foggy, who is a private investigator, and I thought that was a really interesting spin on the story. The villains, I feel like, really are very true to how the villains are in a normal Daredevil comic or on the TV show. I definitely enjoyed this much better than X-Men Noir. The structure and the art and all those things were so much better, and it made a lot more sense. I gave this 4 stars. The only reason I didn't give it 5 stars was because the twist at the end was kind of similar to the X-Men Noir thing. Not like spot on, but it definitely was kind of the same idea, and I was like, that's not the best way I would have liked the twist to go. But I have to say, other than that little element, the only bad thing about Daredevil Noir is that there's not more of it. Why is there not more Daredevil Noir? While I was trying out new comics on Scribd, I found a really interesting one to me called Benzagast. So I read Benzagast Volume 1 by M. Alice Legros. And this is published by a manga company, but it is not a traditional manga. It is not written where you read the panels from right to left, or if you're American, what we would call backwards. And it also doesn't necessarily have manga artwork. She definitely is influenced by that, but it's not strictly manga. This is a story about a young girl who, when she's very little, her parents die, and so she has to move to a very small town to live with her aunt. And as she grows into a teenager, she starts to believe that the house she lives in with her aunt is haunted, but nobody believes her, and her aunt thinks she's kind of crazy. She still manages to befriend a teenage boy, and they have this really great friendship where he really takes care of her, and one day they kind of escape her life and the house that she's in, and they find this weird cemetery, and in this weird cemetery this girl ends up signing this contract by accident that basically says that she has to help all the dead people in the cemetery move on or she will die. So yeah, bless her heart, she's kind of trapped in a cycle of insanity. So Benzagast sounds very strange, and it is very strange. It's a very different kind of story, but I did really enjoy it. I thought it had some really nice elements, really like the characters, the imagination of what the Dead's in-between life was like was really highly imaginative and interesting. It wasn't like my favorite manga or comic that I've ever picked up, but I definitely highly enjoyed it. A fun, fast read. I liked it enough that I would definitely pick up a subsequent book in the series when I have time or when I'm in the mood for reading a comic. So I gave this 4 stars. And I thought while I was still on my comic book loving roll, I would pick up a Peanuts comic. So I picked up Peanuts Volume 1. This, I think, is a combination of new stories written by different authors and also classic comic strips written by Charles Schulz, who created Peanuts. And it's just fun. You can't hate on the Peanuts. You gotta love Charlie Brown and Snoopy and all the other characters' crazy antics. It definitely kept me laughing. So yeah, I couldn't give this anything lower than 5 stars. I can't. I gotta love it. I gotta love the Peanuts. Next, I completed the 3rd book in the Chronicles of Narnia, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, in which Lucy and Edmund and their cousin Eustace fall into a painting that ends up being the Dawn Treader ship, and they help Prince Caspian find the lost lords that used to work for his father. And they have epic adventures on the high sea with Reepicheep, the soldiering mouse. Of course, I really loved this one. I totally forgot a lot of this one, so it was really nice to refresh my memory on some of the elements of it. And for some reason, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader made me laugh the most because I feel like you really got to see more of what Edmund and Reepicheep and Caspian's characters were like. And they had some really witty dialogue. They definitely made me laugh a lot. It was quite funny as well as being quite adventurous and entertaining. So yeah, gotta give this one 5 stars. The last book that I completed in the month of September was my reread of Peter and the Starcatchers by Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson. And this is basically a prequel to the story of Peter Pan. Starts with an orphan boy named Peter and his fellow orphans that are friends of his, and they are all being shipped off to this mysterious country to work for this not very nice king. So they're getting on this yucky ship, and there is also on the ship a young girl named Molly that is about Peter's age, and she kind of has a mysterious secret that has to do with a very interesting trunk, which sort of has a strange effect on people. And basically the rest of the story has to do with how Peter Pan became what he is today and how he ended up on the Isle of Neverland and all that interesting stuff. This is the first book in a series of books. I'm going to try to work on reading more books in the series, which is why I decided to reread this. I really enjoyed reading it the second time because the first time I read it, I hadn't read Peter Pan yet, and the second time I had read Peter Pan, so I definitely got more what they were trying to do with the tone of this novel. I feel like the tone of this book is in between the original Peter Pan story written by J.M. Barrie and also the Disney animated film. So it's a nice mesh of those two kind of feels that those give. I just love this book, which is why I need to read more in this series. I really love finding out how the mermaids became mermaids, how he ended up with Tinkerbell, how Peter Pan is able to fly. All those things are really interesting, but also what I like is how fast-paced the book is. Every chapter really propels into the next chapter. There's lots of action because you have pirates running around, you have shipmates running around, you have a mystery going on. There's lots of groups going after like the same treasure. So I really love that element of the story, and I think it's really exciting. It's a lot of fun, and I of course gave this the same rating that I gave it the first time, 5 stars. Also, the first time I read this, I read it right before I saw the play when the play was on Broadway. So if you ever get a chance to see a version of the play, you should definitely check that out too. It's more of a super comedy, but it is super funny, and the staging is super cool, at least when I saw it. It's also just as nice as this book, even though it's a little different. On to my to be read for the month of October. So I'm definitely going to try to pack in a lot of books this month because it's nearing the end of the year, and I definitely had some goals that I wanted to hit. Now, I have started the book Monster by Frank Peretti, which was on my 2016 reading list. So I'm going to try to complete this rather quickly, as well as another book, which is Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. Both of them are kind of creepy, so I guess it fits for October. Then I'm also going to try to complete the second book in the Peter and the Starcatchers series, which is Peter and the Shadow Thieves. Really excited to get to the second book because I've been meaning to get to it for a while. I still need to get to rereading The Silver Chair in the Chronicles of Narnia series. And if I have a little bit of extra time, I want to get started on the fourth Parasol Protectorate book, which I forgot what it's called, but I would like to get started on that one because that is another series that I want to complete. So I think I should be able to complete most of those as long as I don't get sidetracked by some other fabulous book. That was my full wrap up and to be read. That is it for today. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you next week. Thank you for watching. Bye!